The desperate gamble Captain Jake Morrison stared at the holographic display floating above his ship's navigation console. The numbers didn't lie, but he wished they would. His cargo hauler, the Iron Phoenix, was 3 payments behind on the loan, and the bank's enforcement fleet would arrive in 72 hours. The ship wasn't much to look at, but it was home, and more importantly, it was freedom. The message beacon from Kepler Station crackled to life, interrupting his brooding. Special auction tonight. Rare acquisitions from the Outer Rim. High-value merchandise for discerning buyers. Jake's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant in the lawless sectors. The slave trade disguised itself with fancy words, but the reality remained ugly. He almost deleted the message when desperation whispered in his ear. Maybe there would be legitimate cargo there. Maybe someone would need a transport pilot. Maybe his luck would finally turn around. The station's docking bay buzzed with activity as species from across the galaxy mingled in the shadows. Jake felt out of place among the wealthy merchants and crime lords who populated these underground markets. His worn flight jacket and scuffed boots marked him as small-time, but his empty pockets made him dangerous in a different way. The auction hall reeked of desperation and credits. Beings of every description crowded around the stage where an octopus-like auctioneer waved multiple arms theatrically. Jake pushed through the crowd, drawn by morbid curiosity and the slim hope of finding work. Then he saw her. The woman stood in energy restraints under harsh white lights, her bronze skin gleaming like polished metal. Her hair fell in dark waves around shoulders that spoke of both strength and grace, but it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They burned with defiance that no amount of captivity could extinguish. Lot 47, the auctioneer announced. A prime specimen from the Vorthan Resistance. Completely unbroken, with extensive combat training and technical knowledge. Bidding starts at 30,000 credits. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. 30,000 was more than his ship was worth. The crowd erupted in excited murmurs as the first bids rolled in. 50,000, called a voice from the back. A cybernetic-enhanced Krell waved a jeweled claw, his translator box crackling. With static. 75,000, countered a pale humanoid, whose skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns. The woman's eyes swept the crowd with cool assessment until they found Jake's. In that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simple human understanding in a room full of predators. 100,000, boomed a voice that made Jake's blood freeze. Commander Vex of the Dominion fleet stood near the stage, his scarred face twisted in a cruel smile. She'll make excellent sport in the gladiatorial pits. The woman's composure cracked slightly. Jake saw fear flicker across her features before pride reasserted itself. She lifted her chin defiantly, but he caught the slight tremor in her hands. Going. Once, the auctioneer called. Jake's mouth moved before his brain could stop it. Everything I have. The price of freedom. The auction hall fell silent, except for the hum of recycled air and someone's nervous breathing. Every eye turned to Jake, including the woman's. Her expression shifted from resignation to confusion as she studied this human who had just offered his life savings for a stranger. The auctioneer's tentacles writhed with amusement. Excuse me, friend, but we deal in actual currency here, not emotional declarations. Jake stepped forward, his legs somehow steady despite feeling like overcooked noodles. I'm serious. My ship, my credits, my freedom papers, everything. Total value 112,000 credits. The crowd murmured as portable scanners confirmed his net worth. Commander Vex's mechanical eye whirred as it focused on Jake. You're offering a rust bucket for premium merchandise? The Iron Phoenix has character, Jake replied, surprised by his own steadiness. Plus full fuel tanks, a plasma welder, and navigation charts for the Kepler drift. The woman stared at him as if he'd announced his intention to juggle neutron stars. Her lips moved silently, forming words in a language he didn't recognize. The universal translator in his ear caught fragments. Fool, impossible, why? The auctioneer's greed won out over his skepticism. Sold to the human with more heart than sense. 20 minutes later, Jake stood in the station's processing center, officially the owner of nothing except the clothes on his back and the responsibility for another person's life. The transfer papers crackled in his hand, still warm from the authenticator's seal. The woman remained silent as the neural dampeners were removed from her temples. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of authority that made generals salute. I am Zara Thorne of the Vorthan Defense Corps, daughter of the fallen colony of New Horizon. She paused, studying him with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. You are either the most foolish being in this sector, or the most desperate. Can't I be both? Jake asked, attempting humor. I'm Jake Morrison, former ship owner, current idiot. Welcome to my life of questionable decisions. Zara tilted her head, a gesture that managed to be both military and confused. You traded your vessel for my freedom. This makes no tactical sense. Yeah, well, logic and I aren't exactly on speaking terms these days. Jake gestured toward the corridor leading to the docking bays. Speaking of which, we should probably get out of here before someone decides to repossess you. They walked through the station's maze-like passages, past vendors selling everything from synthetic organs to bottled starlight. Zara moved with fluid grace, but Jake caught her flinching whenever someone got too close. The trauma of captivity clung to her like a second skin. So, Jake said, trying to fill the awkward silence. Resistance fighter, huh? I've never traveled with a soldier before. Do I need to salute or learn special handshakes? On Vorthan, we had a saying, Zara replied, her voice softening slightly. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. She glanced at him sideways. Your courage appears to be approximately 90% desperation. Jake laughed despite himself. Ouch. And here I thought I was being noble. If that was nobility, I fear to witness your attempts at stupidity. They reached the docking bay, where a small shuttle waited. Jake had negotiated it as part of his bankruptcy package, trading his beloved ship for this cramped emergency vessel, and the woman walking beside him. This is our transportation, Jake said, patting the shuttle's dented hull. Meet the last hope. She's got character, life support that works most of the time, and a top speed of eventually. Zara examined the shuttle with the expression most people reserve for week-old fish. The airlock appears to be held together with molecular tape and optimism. Hey, optimism is a valid starship component, Jake protested. Besides, should get us where we need to go. And where exactly is that? Jake realized he hadn't thought that far ahead. Honestly, anywhere that's not here. Unlikely allies. 3 days into their journey through the asteroid belt, Jake discovered that traveling with a former resistance fighter was both educational and exhausting. Zara had opinions about everything from his piloting technique to his choice of emergency rations, and she wasn't shy about sharing them. Your flight pattern is inefficient, she observed, watching him navigate around a particularly large asteroid. You're using 15% more fuel than necessary. Maybe, but we're still alive, Jake replied, adjusting course. That's got to count for something. She moved to the navigation console, her fingers dancing over controls with practiced ease. On Vorthan, we learned to fly before we could walk. Our world was mostly asteroid fields and gas clouds. You either learned to pilot well, or you became space debris. Jake watched her work, impressed despite himself. What happened to your world? Zara's hands stilled on the controls. The Dominion Empire decided we were too independent. They glassed the surface and scattered the survivors to the winds. Most of my people ended up in slave markets or worse. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but Jake meant them. Don't be. Sorrow won't bring back the dead. She turned back to the controls, her voice steady. But vengeance might give there. Sacrifice meaning. The proximity alarms suddenly screamed to life. Jake's blood turned to ice as he saw the scatter display. 3 ships were closing fast from multiple vectors, their signatures marking them as Dominion interceptors. Company, Jake announced, his hands flying over the controls. Looks like Commander Vex didn't take losing very well. Zara was already moving, her military training taking over. These shuttles weren't designed for combat. Our weapons are barely adequate for asteroid clearing. Then we'll have to be creative. Jake pushed the engines to maximum, feeling the whole ship vibrate. In protest, any brilliant resistance tactics you'd like to share? Actually, yes. Zara's fingers found a hidden panel Jake hadn't noticed. This shuttle has been modified. The previous owner installed some interesting upgrades. The panel opened to reveal military-grade electronics that definitely weren't standard. Jake's eyes widened as he recognized Vorthan resistance technology. Is that what I think it is? Electromagnetic pulse generator, shield disruptors, and a cloaking field that might work for 30 seconds. Zara's hands moved with deadly precision. More than enough to even the odds. The first interceptor opened fire, plasma bolts lighting up the asteroid field around them. Jake threw the shuttle into a spiraling dive, using the floating rocks as cover. Can you get us out of here? Watch and learn, Zara replied, her voice carrying the cold confidence of a veteran warrior. She activated the EMP generator just as the second interceptor moved into range. The enemy ship's systems flickered and died, sending it tumbling into an asteroid. The third ship fired desperately, but Zara had already engaged the cloaking field. For 30 precious seconds, they were invisible. Jake used every bit of piloting skill he possessed, threading the needle between asteroids while their pursuers fired blindly. When the cloak failed, they were already beyond effective weapons range. That was incredible, Jake breathed, checking their status. Where did you learn to do that? Vorthan resistance fighters don't survive by playing fair, Zara replied, but there was something almost like approval in her voice. Your piloting wasn't terrible either. High praise from a military expert. Don't let it go to your head. But she was almost smiling. The communication system crackled to life. Commander Vex's voice filled the cabin, distorted by static, but unmistakably furious. You cannot run forever, Morrison. The Empire has a long memory and longer reach. Jake reached for the transmit button, but Zara's hand stopped him. Don't give him the satisfaction, she said quietly. Actions speak louder than words. Instead, she activated the ship's emergency beacon, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Zara Thorne of the Vorthan Defense Corps. I am alive, I am free, and I am coming home. The message would reach every resistance cell in the sector. Jake realized their little escape had just become something much bigger. Well, he said, settling back in his pilot's seat, I guess we're really committed now. Welcome to the rebellion, Zara replied, and this time she was definitely smiling. The human factor, the trading post at Haven's Edge, hung in space like a metallic flower, its petals actually docking arms that embraced ships from across the galaxy. Jake had hoped to refuel quietly and disappear into the outer rim, but Zara's broadcast had changed everything. 15 ships on approach, Jake announced, studying the scanner display. All broadcasting resistance codes. Zara stood beside him, her posture straight and military, despite the civilian clothes they'd acquired. They're coming to see if the reports are true. Most of them had never seen a free Vorthan. The first ship to dock was a converted mining vessel bristling with hidden weapons. Its captain, a scarred woman named Petra Nox, greeted them with the kind of bear hug that could crack ribs. "Zara Thorne," she said, pulling back to study her friend's face. "When we heard you were captured, we thought you were dead for sure. I would have been, if not for him." Zara nodded toward Jake, who was trying to look inconspicuous in the corner. "Jake Morrison. He paid everything he had to buy my freedom." "Captain." Knox turned to study Jake with new interest. "Human, right? Don't see many of your kind out here in the contested zones." "I'm not exactly a tourist," Jake replied. "Just a guy who made a stupid decision that turned out right." "Stupid decisions. That workout are called tactics," Knox said with a grin. "You might fit in here after all." The next few hours brought a parade of resistance fighters, smugglers, and free traders. All of them wanted to hear the story of the human who'd bankrupted himself to free a stranger. Jake found himself telling the tale repeatedly, each time, feeling more uncomfortable with the hero worship in their eyes. "You don't understand?" he told a group of young fighters. "I wasn't trying to be noble. I was desperate and stupid." "Sometimes that's the same thing," one of them replied. "The Empire counts on people being too smart to take risks." Zara found him later, sitting alone in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars. "Having second thoughts?" "Third and fourth thoughts," Jake admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to point out that I'm just a broke cargo pilot who got lucky." "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" Zara settled beside him, her voice thoughtful. "I see someone who looked at an impossible situation and decided to act anyway. That's not luck, Jake. That's character. Character doesn't pay the bills or win wars. No, but it inspires others to try." She pointed to the window where dozens of resistance ships were gathering. "Every person out there has a story about the Empire crushing their dreams. Most of them gave up fighting because they thought they were alone. And now? Now they see that even a stranger was willing to risk everything for freedom. You've given them something they'd forgotten they had. What's that?" "Hope, I chime from." The communication system interrupted them. Captain Knox's voice echoed through the station. "All ships, we've got Imperial reinforcements jumping in. Looks like our little party attracted attention." Through the viewport, Jake saw the distinctive angular shapes of Dominion battleships materializing from hyperspace. The resistance fleet was outgunned and outmanned, but no one was running. "This is Admiral Vex," a familiar voice announced over the communications channel. "Surrender the escaped prisoner and the human who aided her, and the rest of you will be allowed to depart." The silence stretched for long seconds. Then Captain Knox's voice cut through the static. "This is the Free Fleet. We don't negotiate with tyrants." One by one, other ships added their voices to the defiance. Jake watched in amazement as freighters, mining ships, and converted pleasure craft prepared to face down military vessels that could destroy them with single shots. "They're going to get slaughtered," he whispered. "Maybe," Zara replied, "but they're going to fight." That's what you gave them, Jake. The courage to stand up. The first shots lit up the darkness between the stars. Jake had never seen space combat before, and the reality was both beautiful and terrifying. The resistance ships moved like a swarm, using their superior numbers and knowledge of the local asteroid fields to harass the larger Imperial vessels. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, but his feet wouldn't move. "No," Zara said firmly. "We need to help them." She was already moving toward the docking bay where the last hope waited. Jake caught up with her at the airlock. "Our ship has no weapons," he protested. "It has something better," Zara replied, her eyes blazing with determination. "It has us." The price of freedom, the last hope, slipped away from Haven's edge while the battle raged around them. Jake had never felt more terrified or more alive as he piloted through the crossfire. following Zara's guidance toward the heart of the Imperial. Formation. There, Zara pointed to the largest battleship, its hull bristling with weapons. That's Vex's flagship, the Iron Fist. If we can disable their command ship, the rest of the fleet will lose coordination. With what? Jake demanded. We've got mining lasers and good intentions. We have something better. We have surprise and desperation. Zara was already working at the modified control panel. The Vorthan resistance specialized in asymmetric warfare. Sometimes the smallest force can achieve the greatest victory. Jake watched the scanner as they approached the massive ship. Please, tell me you have a plan. The Iron Fist has a weakness. All Dominion ships do. Zara's fingers flew over the controls. Their shield generators are linked to the main computer core. If we can introduce a virus into their system. You want to hack a battleship? I want to crash a battleship. Zara looked up from her work, and Jake saw something in her eyes that made his blood freeze. The Vorthan resistance developed. Virus that turns a ship's own systems against it. But it requires physical contact to transmit. Understanding hit Jake like a meteor. You're talking about a suicide run. I'm talking about freedom, Zara replied quietly. For everyone. The Iron Fist grew larger on their view screen, its weapons tracking their approach. Jake knew they had seconds before the battleship's defenses would vaporize them. There has to be another way, he said. There is. We can run. Hide in the outer rim while the Empire hunts down every resistance cell one by one. Zara's voice was steady. Or we can make a stand here today and show the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for. Warning lights flashed as the battleship's targeting systems locked onto them. Jake's hands hovered over the controls, torn between survival and sacrifice. Your choice, Jake, Zara said. But choose quickly. Jake thought about his old life, hauling cargo from system to system, always alone, always running from creditors. And complications. Then he thought about the fighters they'd left behind, facing impossible odds, because one human had been stupid enough to care about a stranger. Well, he said, pushing the engines to maximum, I always said I'd go out in a blaze of glory. The Iron Fist opened fire just as they reached the hull. Jake felt the ship shake as defensive lasers scored hits, but somehow they made it to the docking bay. The shuttle's hull cracked like an egg as they crashed through the energy barrier. Virus. Uploaded, Zara announced as alarms screamed around them. 30 seconds to cascade failure. Imperial Marines were already converging on their position. Jake grabbed the emergency kit and helped Zara to her feet. She was bleeding from a head wound, but her eyes were clear. Any regrets? She asked. Just one, Jake replied, checking his sidearm. I should have bought you dinner first. Zara laughed, a sound like music in the chaos. Next time. The battleship's lights flickered as the virus spread through its systems. Somewhere in the distance, Jake heard the distinctive whine of power cores going critical. The Iron Fist was eating itself alive from the inside. Escape pods, Zara said, pointing to the emergency stations. We might actually survive this. They ran through corridors filling with smoke and panic. Imperial crew members pushed past them, too focused on their own survival to worry about two refugees. Jake had never been so happy to be ignored. The escape pod launched just as the Iron Fist began to break apart. Through the small viewport, Jake watched the mighty battleship fold in on itself, its hull buckling as internal explosions tore it apart. Look, Zara whispered, pointing to the scanner display. The remaining Imperial ships were retreating, their formation broken by the loss of their flagship. The Resistance fleet was battered but intact, and more ships were arriving every minute. News of the victory was spreading across the galaxy. We did it, Jake said, hardly believing it himself. No, Zara corrected, her hand finding his. We started it. This is just the beginning. Their pod was picked up by Captain Knox's ship an hour later. The scarred woman greeted them with another bone-crushing hug and a bottle of something that burned like liquid fire. "To Jake Morrison," she announced to the cheering crowd, "the human who reminded us what it means to be free." Jake looked around at the faces surrounding him, people from dozens of worlds united by hope and determination. He thought about his old life, his lost ship, his empty bank account. Somehow, none of it seemed important anymore. "To freedom," he replied, raising his glass. "And to stupid decisions that work out." Zara smiled and clinked her glass against his. "To new beginnings." Outside the viewports, the Resistance fleet was growing larger by the hour. The rebellion had found its spark, and Jake Morrison, former cargo pilot and current legend, had finally found his place in the galaxy. The war was just beginning, but for the first time in years, Jake felt like he was exactly where he belonged.